Elvis Presley. Just hearing his name makes people think of loud cheering fans, shiny clothes, and a voice that changed music forever. But behind the bright lights and fancy outfits, Elvis was a man dealing with fear and pain. He may have been called the king of rock and roll, and he may have been loved all over the world, but his family life wasn't easy. Some people believe Elvis had a deep secret, a serious problem with someone close to him, a private conflict that was never shared with the public. Until now. Fast forward to today. Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, now owns Graceland. She stands at the center of a legacy worth hundreds of millions. Fans see her as the rightful heir, beautiful, successful, and deeply connected to the Presley name. But there's a shadow that follows her, one that no one wants to talk about. Because the truth is, Elvis may have despised the idea of her ever touching his empire. Sounds harsh, right? But let's look closer. Elvis Presley had strict views on fame, family, and legacy. He was fiercely protective of his image, his privacy, and most of all, his sanctuary, Graceland. And now the very person running it is a Hollywood actress. The same industry Elvis blamed for tearing apart his peace. There are notes, private scribbles found years later, that hint at anger, disappointment, warnings about the future, words like "keep them away" and "don't let it happen." We don't know exactly who he meant, but the implications? They're haunting. Riley has said she feels her grandfather's presence in the upstairs rooms of Graceland, that she can still smell his cologne, still hear his music. But what if those walls are echoing something else? A warning? A silent protest from a man who never wanted his home turned into a spectacle, and certainly not overseen by someone chasing the spotlight. This isn't just another family drama, this is Elvis Presley's final act of control, playing out decades after his death. Was it hatred, or was it fear? A desperate attempt to protect what he built from the very people who now claim to protect it? In this video, we're not here to sensationalize. We're here to unpack a tension that's been hidden in plain sight, the untold scars in the Presley bloodline, the strange silence around Riley's place in Elvis's world, and the shocking clues left behind that point to a feud we were never meant to uncover. Because sometimes the biggest stories are the ones no one wants to talk about. Until now. Riley Keough was born into a legacy most people can't imagine. She grew up with fame, money, and the kind of history that makes the world lean in to listen. But from the very beginning, something felt off. Something colder than the golden lights of Graceland. While fans clung to every memory of Elvis Presley, Riley grew up mostly in the shadows of that myth. And when she talks about Graceland today, it's not as a home, it's more like a haunted museum. As a child, Riley remembers being told not to touch anything upstairs. The air felt different there, stale, still, like the house was holding its breath. His bed was still made, his books still by the nightstand. She recalls seeing his clothes hanging neatly in the closet. But she doesn't recall love, not in the way people imagine a granddaughter would feel toward her grandfather. There were no bedtime stories, no warm family tales passed down, just silence. And maybe that silence started long before she was born. Elvis's relationship with Lisa Marie, Riley's mother, wasn't exactly a father-daughter fairy tale. He loved her, yes, but he also wrestled with the idea of fatherhood. He was absent often, distracted by fame, struggling with demons that grew louder as the years went on. Some letters from that time mention Lisa in vague, frustrated terms, as someone he wished he could reach, but couldn't. So when Lisa Marie had Riley, Elvis was already gone. But the tension, it didn't die with him. Elvis had a deep mistrust of the Hollywood machine. He felt used by it, trapped in a cycle of roles and songs he didn't always want. He openly spoke about how showbiz corrupted innocence. He warned those closest to him about fame's darker side. Now think about this. Riley Keough chose to become an actress, to jump into the very world her grandfather feared. Not only that, she built her name away from Presley. She didn't use the name to get famous, but maybe that made it worse. To some close to the family, Riley's career choice was a rebellion. Others saw it as fate. Either way, there's no record of Elvis ever writing about a granddaughter, no mention in notes. No reference in conversations recorded by close friends, and no family photos that show the two together for obvious reasons. But even in memorials or posthumous dedications, Riley's name is rarely included, and that brings up a chilling question. Was she truly part of his legacy? Or just... It's not that Riley ever spoke badly about Elvis. In fact, she often defends his memory, insisting she feels his presence in Graceland. But listen closely, and you'll notice something missing. There's no warmth, no personal anecdotes passed down from her mother, no sense that Elvis wanted her to continue his legacy. Just a duty Riley seems determined to fulfill, even if she's unsure whether he would have wanted her to. Some fans believe Elvis would have admired her strength. Others say he'd be furious that someone from the world he hated now holds the keys to his castle. It's easy to romanticize what a grandfather-granddaughter bond should be. But this story isn't about what should have been, it's about what wasn't. Riley's rise in Hollywood and her unexpected inheritance of Graceland is a clash of worlds. The quiet man who wanted peace now has a granddaughter who walks red carpets, who stars in edgy dramas, who gives interviews in designer gowns. It's not right or wrong. It's just opposite. And sometimes opposites don't attract, they repel. To the public, Riley is a shining continuation of the Presley legacy, a face for the future. But to Elvis, had he lived to meet her, she may have represented the end of everything he tried to protect. And that's what makes this story so haunting. Let's get into the part that really makes people stop and think, because rumors are one thing, but evidence, even subtle, is a different beast. After Lisa Marie's death, when Riley officially stepped into control of Graceland, some close to the estate began whispering about things found upstairs. Hidden boxes, notes scribbled in the margins of old books, and most chilling of all, phrases that didn't feel like song lyrics or prayers. They felt like warnings. One of the most talked about items? A torn piece of paper found in Elvis's private study. On it, only a few words. Keep her away. Protect the house. No name, no date, just that cryptic sentence circled over and over. Some say he was referring to Hollywood agents. Others believe it was his way of drawing a line between himself and the future, anyone he couldn't control. And in that future stood Riley Keough. Elvis was a man who clung to the familiar. He didn't like change. He didn't trust people easily. He surrounded himself with the same circle for years, barely letting new faces in. His world was tightly controlled, and Graceland, especially the upstairs, was his sanctuary. Now picture this. Decades later, Riley walks into that space, not as a visitor, not as a grieving granddaughter, but as the new owner, with power over every inch. For some, that felt like justice. For others, a violation. And then there's the will, or rather, the changes made to it. In 2016, Lisa Marie amended the trust to place Riley in charge of Elvis's estate. But when that decision went public, it sparked a quiet legal battle. Priscilla Presley challenged the amendment. Some said it was about money, but others saw something deeper, an attempt to keep Riley out, to preserve whatever fragile boundary Elvis had left behind. The whispers got louder. People who had worked at Graceland for years started speaking, off the record. One claimed that Elvis kept a journal in his final months, mostly unreadable scribbles, except for one section. In it, he writes about feeling watched, about not trusting the bloodline, about fearing that the legacy will be twisted. There's no mention of Riley by name. But the timing lines up with Lisa Marie's early life, a period Elvis approached with both love and unease. Was he afraid of what his name might become? Riley has said in interviews that she respects her grandfather deeply, that she feels guided by him in her decisions. But there's a subtle tension in her words. She never says she knew him. She never claims to fully understand him. And how could she? Elvis died long before she was born. Her entire image of him is constructed through stories, photographs, and myths. And maybe, just maybe, that distance is mutual. Some say Elvis was paranoid, that he saw threats where there were none. But paranoia or not, he built walls. And Riley, she was born outside of them. What adds another layer to all of this is how Riley has handled her role. She hasn't opened up the upstairs to the public. She hasn't tried to cash in on the mystery. In fact, she's preserved the silence, almost religiously. But is that out of respect or fear? Maybe she feels that same invisible tension, the kind of chill you can't explain, like walking into a room where you know someone didn't want you to be. There's a story an employee once told. Riley walked into Elvis's private meditation room, known as the Quiet Room, and sat down alone. After just a few minutes, she walked out, said nothing, and avoided that room for weeks. When asked why, she just said, "Because here's the truth. Sometimes you don't need to see the word hate written down to feel it. You can feel it in the silence, in the omissions, in the places your name never appears." And for Riley, those silences might say everything. In a way, this isn't just about a granddaughter and her grandfather. It's about identity, ownership, and whether legacy is something you inherit or something that has to accept you. The Presley estate has never officially addressed these questions, and they probably never will. But in the softest echoes of Graceland, in the dusty pages of Elvis's journals, and in the subtle way Riley walks the halls, careful, quiet, unsure, you get the sense that something unresolved still lingers. Was it hate? Was it fear? Or was it just a man desperately trying to protect a part of himself from his own family? When Lisa Marie Presley passed away, the world mourned a daughter, a mother, and the last direct link to Elvis Presley himself. But behind the public grief, something was brewing, something far less sentimental. It wasn't just about saying goodbye, it was about control. And at the heart of it all was Graceland. Riley Keough didn't just inherit a house, she inherited a kingdom, a brand, an empire woven together with money, fame, and myth. And right away, that inheritance was challenged. Priscilla Presley, Lisa Marie's mother and Elvis's ex-wife, took legal action. She claimed that the 2016 amendment to Lisa's trust, giving control to Riley, was suspicious. She questioned signatures, documents, and whether Lisa had even wanted Riley in charge. To outsiders, it looked like a typical estate squabble. But to those paying attention, this was something deeper. It was a war between the past and the future. On one side, Priscilla, the woman who had protected Elvis's image for decades. On the other, Riley, a Hollywood actress barely involved in the family business until recently. It didn't take long before fans started asking, what would Elvis have wanted? Some said Priscilla was only doing what Elvis would have done, keeping control of the legacy close to the core family. Others argued she was standing in the way of a new generation that could give Graceland a fresh voice. But no matter where you stand, the message was clear. Riley wasn't being welcomed with open arms. What's more, Riley stayed quiet. No dramatic interviews, no emotional press releases, just a silent, strategic takeover. She stepped into the role with a calm that unnerved people. She began approving exhibition plans, preserving documents, even digitizing private letters. She made it clear she was in charge now. But not everyone believed she belonged there. And that's where the emotional core of this feud really lives. See, Riley may have the title, but Graceland is soaked in decades of Presley pain, loyalty, and secrets. To many fans, and maybe to Priscilla, it felt like letting Riley take over was letting go of Elvis's true intentions, maybe even betraying them. And to make it more complex, Riley never knew Elvis. He never saw her, never wrote about her. She was a stranger to him. So how can a stranger now hold the keys to the kingdom? That's the question people are still wrestling with. And while the legal battle ended in a quiet settlement, the emotional damage was already done. It exposed cracks in the Presley family that had long been glossed over, and it forced Riley into a position she never publicly asked for, but now completely owns. Some say Riley's silence throughout it all was strategic. Others say it was fear, maybe even guilt. But silence can speak louder than any court document. And in this case, it did. The truth is, Graceland has always been more than a house. It's a symbol of Elvis's rise, his fall, his desire to be left alone, and now it's in the hands of a woman who never heard his voice in real life, who never got to sit on his lap or hear him call her name. That doesn't make her less of a Presley, but it does make the story far more complicated, and perhaps that's what makes this feud so heartbreaking. It's not about who deserves the legacy, it's about who was included in it to begin with. Let's step away from the courtrooms and conspiracy theories for a moment and talk about something even more complicated: emotion. Could Elvis Presley and Riley Keough have ever made peace with one another if they had met? It's hard to say. Elvis was a man shaped by fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being misunderstood, fear of his legacy being twisted after death. And Riley? She's a woman who grew up in a whirlwind of fame and expectation, trying to carve out her own place without being swallowed by her family name. The distance between them isn't just years, it's identity. There's one room in Graceland Riley talks about more than any other: the quiet room. Elvis built it as a place to escape, to meditate, to breathe. And Riley once said that standing in that room felt like being someone else's mind. Not a performer, not a legend, just a man searching for silence. It's one of the only moments where Riley ever seemed to connect with her grandfather, not as a legend, not as a cultural icon, but as a human being. Standing in that quiet room inside Graceland, she felt something shift. The stillness, the soft lighting, the untouched cushions. It was as if she had stepped inside the very mind of Elvis Presley. In that brief moment, she didn't need fame to feel close to him. She didn't need his name etched into her career or her life. She just needed to feel something real. And maybe, just maybe, that was the key. Not inheritance, not image, but simple, unspoken understanding. But here's where it gets complicated. Would Elvis have accepted that kind of connection? Would he have seen it as genuine or invasive? This was a man who, at the height of his fame, built walls, not just around his home, but around his heart. He had a habit of pushing people away the moment they got too close, too curious, too real. For Elvis, privacy wasn't just a preference, it was protection. He guarded his space, his routines, his pain, like sacred relics. Now imagine Riley walking into his life today. She's bold, independent, famous in her own right. The media watches her every move. Interviews highlight her Presley bloodline. Would Elvis have seen her as family or as another threat to his peace? Would he have pulled her into his world or locked the doors tighter than ever? That's the haunting question. Because sometimes the hardest people to reach are the ones we want to understand the most. And sometimes the deepest bonds never get a chance to form, not because of hate, but because of fear. And fear can be just as powerful as love, if not more. We don't know, and maybe we never will. But here's what we do know. Riley isn't trying to become Elvis. She's not putting on his shoes. She's just trying to protect the house he left behind and, in her own way, keep his story from being rewritten by strangers. That might not be the legacy Elvis imagined, but it's the one she's building. Maybe that's enough. Maybe peace doesn't come from words or time or even forgiveness. Maybe it comes from doing the work anyway, even when no one claps, even when the ghosts never say thank you. What do you think? Was Elvis truly trying to protect his legacy from people like Riley? Or is this all just a case of misunderstood silence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We genuinely want to hear your perspective. If this story moved you or made you see the Presley family in a new light, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves music history. And don't forget to subscribe for more raw, untold stories just like this. Tap the bell icon so you never miss an upload, because sometimes the truth isn't loud. It's buried in whispers.